Freddie Scappaticci, one of Britain's top spies in the IRA. Codename Steak Knife.
The famous steak knife. He was obviously someone who had access to the higher levels of the IRA.
An IRA spy catcher skilled at interrogating suspected informers.
They get you into a room, they blindfold you, they strip you, and they think they're going to go home, but they don't.
An IRA enforcer and executioner.
There's not one killing that Freddie Scappaticci was involved in that the IRA did not sanction.
Freddie Scappaticci denied his double life when exposed.
I'm not guilty of any of these allegations.
His death was announced while a multi-million-pound police investigation into his activities is ongoing. Much is unknown about Freddie Scappaticci's life in the shadows. But just one single episode exposed how he operated inside the IRA while on the state's books.
This is a story of a spy who got away with murder.
West Belfast in the 1980s. An Irish Republican enclave where many were subject to the IRA's rules. Such warnings to so-called touts were frequently borne out.
Charlie McElmurray's body was found in this van on Sunday. He'd been tortured and shot in the head.
Charlie McElmurray, a West Belfast taxi driver suspected of being a tout, slang for an informer, was shot dead in 1987.
I think that Mr. McElmurray, like anyone else living in West Belfast, knows that the consequence for informing is death.
I mean, if Republican activists who know what the repercussions are for going over to the other side, in fact go over to the other side, then they, more than anyone else, are totally and absolutely aware of what the penalty for doing that is.
Death.
Death, certainly.
Freddie Scappaticci was under orders to enforce the IRA's rules for so-called traitors.
The standard procedure is to strip them and debug them, right, just to see if they're wired up. And they usually put a boiler suit on them, put them in a chair facing the wall, right, and then go from there.
Scappaticci was once secretly recorded explaining his technique for extracting confessions.
They get you into a room, they blindfold you, right, strip you, they'll have you sitting there, right, maybe the room's cold, they make you all sorts of promises. Everybody being what they are, everybody's a breaking point, you know.
Within the IRA, informers were despised figures.
The fear of being accused of being an informer was probably the worst thing imaginable in the IRA. I mean, what circle of hell could Dante have created for the informer? This was an awful allegation to have to put up with. And for an informer's family, the stigma was powerful. Can you think of a worse crime to be guilty of than informing? No, no.
In West Belfast, the IRA's summary justice was dispensed in alleyways.
In a statement, the IRA said they shot Joseph Fenton because he was what they called a British agent.
Joe Fenton, a suspected informer, had first been interrogated in this house before his execution. It's also where, several months later, another suspected informer, Sandy Lynch, was brought to. His account of what happened to him gives us the greatest insight into Scappaticci at work as a spy catcher. An actor is giving voice to edited extracts of what Lynch told the authorities about his ordeal.
I belonged to the Provisional Irish Republican Army. The unit was under control of the Belfast Brigade, Sean Maguire was second in command. I entered the house. Maguire was walking behind me. I went up the stairs, and someone was behind me. Someone who I believed was Scappaticci.
Sandy Lynch was in Freddie Scappaticci's sights.
We entered a room at the top of the stairs. Maguire and I were talking. The room was in darkness. I felt a hand on the back of my head, and I was pushed down onto a bed. And I heard a voice saying, "IRA security."
Sandy Lynch was stripped, blindfolded and tied up.
And I was searched from head to foot. And I felt something which I believed to be a metal detector going over my body. And I heard a voice. Scappaticci said this thing was going haywire. He said the cunt's wired to fuck.
For over an hour, according to Sandy Lynch, others in the room taunted him.
One of them told me that he enjoyed his work and that he would break me. A voice said the only way I would leave the room was to be taken out and shot for being a touting bastard.
For a time, the IRA disappeared suspected informers. But shooting and burying people in bogs or shallow graves did not solve the IRA's problem with leaks. In the mid-1970s, it's alleged that Gerry Adams was among those who reorganised the IRA.
Gerry Adams drew up a blueprint for a restructured IRA based on four-man cells, ASUs, active service units. These gave improved security. They were independent, separated by cut-offs, and far harder to penetrate by our own informants.
Gerry Adams has consistently denied being a member of the IRA and refutes the allegations that he was among those who reorganised it. In 1978, the IRA set up a security unit to flush out spies.
Freddie Scappaticci joined the new security unit. The twist is that the IRA man who became one of the IRA's spy catchers was already a British Army agent.
Codename Steak Knife.
The famous steak knife was handed on to me in 1978 as being an important person.
That year, David Ramsbottom was the Army commander in Belfast.
He was there when I arrived. I mean, he'd already started giving information. And I was briefed that my responsibility was every time Steak Knife made contact to make certain that we had a handler who knew him on tap, so that Steak Knife always saw a soldier that he knew.
Scappaticci was handled with care because he was worth it. He had access to every IRA department. He knew who was on the up, personal weaknesses, insights that could prove useful for turning others. He even vetted new recruits. The unit designed to protect the IRA was, in effect, a gift to its enemy.
The moment anything from Steak Knife came in, we knew it had to be handed on immediately. It was definitely high grade as about policy rather than the low grade about who was going to be attacked by a bomb or a pistol. I mean, he was obviously someone who had access to the higher levels of the IRA.
Scappaticci had such access, not least because informer death sentences had to be authorised by one of the IRA's 7-person Army Council, such as Martin McGuinness. In a 2-year period beginning May 1980, more IRA members were killed by the IRA's own internal security than by the police and army.
For a man apparently a member of the Provisional IRA and judged by them to be a police informer, ruthless punishment. hands tied behind his back, shot several times in the head, and then left beside this country lane.
Those at the top continued to order a brutal tally of executions.
Mr. Hegarty was shot in the head. His hands were tied behind his back.
Even IRA inmates knew of the security unit's fearsome reputation. In prison, Anthony McIntyre raised his concerns with a senior Republican.
There were stories coming out that made the point, you know, like the security, internal security seems to have far too much power. And he just said to me, do you realise the amount of times that the internal security unit have saved the Army Council? Now, I didn't think much about it at the time. In later years, I've come to the view that that's perhaps what the internal security unit's real raison d'etre was. Their real purpose was to protect the Army Council. The British wanted that Army Council post-1983 in place because they knew that the Army Council were assets, and I differentiate between assets and agents here, that they were assets in as far as they were going to deliver a solution.
Former IRA prisoner Gerard Hodgins knew Scappaticci to be part of the IRA's security unit.
I would have first bumped into Freddie Scappaticci from about 1986 onwards, when I was initially working with Sinn Féin in West Belfast and then the Republican Press Centre, as well as my other duties. He's just somebody I knew from the IRA, and he's just somebody that he would know from the IRA.
Scappaticci viewed the IRA's armed campaign being waged away from Sinn Féin press centres as murder.
They do a lot of business in their centres, but hard IRA business they don't do. But not actually going out to murder people, that's never done in Ireland.
In West Belfast, he frequently met Martin McGuinness and other senior IRA figures.
On the day of their meeting, Freddie Scappaticci would come in and hang about the press centre before heading on round wherever Northern Command has theirs.
The meetings gave Scappaticci an extraordinary insight into the structure of the IRA's Northern Command.
Nothing happens in Northern Command that McGuinness doesn't okay. But there's another person, he's his adjutant, a fella called Sean Spike Murray. They have what's called a Northern Command security team, right? And it's under the control of Spike Murray. Murray moves in and out of that sort of IRA, all that, right? See if they're doing any interrogations of so-called informers. That's what they're doing in that area.
Freddie Scappaticci was not the only well-placed, long-running agent within the IRA.
But what marks his double life apart from others is that we know some of what he was never held accountable for, remarkably from another spy in the IRA, Sandy Lynch. In the room where Sandy Lynch was being interrogated, Scappaticci upped the ante.
He said, "Do you know who I am, Sandy?" I said, "Yes." He said, "You know me, but I don't give two fucks, because where you're going, you'll not be telling no one." When he was speaking to me, he stood with his elbows on my shoulders and his chin on my head.
See where people saying that they use a lot of violence? They don't really. Physical violence they don't use. Now they use mental violence, obviously. You know? It's a psychological thing, you see.
He was very aggressive. He said that if he has his way, I would get a jab in the arse and wake up in God's country.
With God's country, Scappaticci was referring to South Armagh.
He said that I would wake up hung upside down in a cow shed, and that he would talk to me the way that he wanted to talk to me. That he would skin me alive, and that no one would hear me squealing. He mentioned my wife. He told me that she would be depressed when she had to come down and identify me, and that I would have no face because he would make sure that I would have no face.
And then Scappaticci spoke of Joe Fenton, who'd been shot dead only months earlier.
He tapped me 2 or 3 times on the back of my head and said, "You'll get it right there." He said, like that bastard Fenton. He said his people could only identify him by his jewellery because he had been shot in the back of the head and he had no face. He said that he had done it.
According to Sandy Lynch, an admission from Freddie Scappaticci that he had shot Joe Fenton. Sandy Lynch eventually broke. He admitted he was a police informer. His blindfold was taken off, his hands untied so that he could write a statement admitting his guilt.
I was told that if I wanted to make a plea for lenience from the leadership saying why I shouldn't be shot, to go ahead.
The next morning, Scappaticci returned.
He said, "Look, Sandy, the cunts across the road are not happy with the statement and they want you to make a tape." A microphone was passed to me.
The order signified that Sandy Lynch was going to be executed. Tapes of so-called confessions were played to bereaved families as justification for death sentences handed down.
Sandy Lynch recorded his statement.
I was told that if all went well, that I would be home soon.
A trademark line to suspected informers when the reality, in fact, was stark.
I think they're going to go home, but they don't.
By late Saturday night, additional manpower was needed. Gerard Hodgins was told, along with others, to go to the house.
I had no idea that his name was Sandy Lynch. That's 10. I was just told to go to a house, babysit. The guy was an informer. When we went through the door, there was men coming down the stairs. Sean McGuire, Freddie Scappaticci. I bumped into him right at the bottom of the stairs and he looked up at the room where Sandy was and he mouthed the word "bastard." And he went like that. You know, which to me was sort of saying he should be shot there, you know.
But Sandy Lynch survived. Police raided the house, arresting Gerard Hodgins and others. Those who'd already left included Sean McGuire and Freddie Scappaticci. Scappaticci had, however, left something behind: fingerprints on the battery of an anti-bugging device. A police fingerprint expert said he was certain that the imprint was made by Frederick Scappaticci. Sandy Lynch, who'd been a police informer, agreed to give evidence in court before he entered a protection program. His testimony was key to the conviction of 8 people on kidnapping and interrogation charges, but one accusation he made never led to a charge. His testimony included Freddie Scappaticci's admission about Joe Fenton.
He said that he had done it.
But Scappaticci was, it seems, untouchable, because by the time he was arrested, it was in connection with his fingerprint and he'd already concocted a false alibi. In custody, he broke an IRA rule. He spoke under questioning.
I represented Fred Scappaticci. There was an allegation that he was connected to the house via a fingerprint, or fingerprints, I can't remember. And he gave a prepared statement, which in itself was unusual for anyone connected to the IRA to make statements in Castlereagh Holding Centre. And secondly, he was released without charge. At that time, I was relatively inexperienced. I didn't see anything particularly unusual other than that. That was the system working its way through. Police took a view that there was insufficient evidence to prosecute. On reflection, years later, I have to seriously question that decision. On the face of it, there was probably sufficient evidence to charge him, prosecute him, and remand him into custody. That didn't happen. We know now why that didn't happen.
And in a nutshell, why?
Because he was an agent.
Kevin Winters now represents the families of several of those killed by Scappaticci's IRA unit.
There is an irony, and it's not lost on me, that I represented this man 25 years on. I'm now representing many of his victims.
Freddie Scappaticci is thought to be linked to the murders of over 20 people. Decades on, he did have a day in court.
Freddie Scappaticci, who's alleged to have been the Army's highest-ranking IRA agent, has been given a suspended prison sentence after pleading guilty to possessing over 300 extreme pornographic images.
That was the only charge brought against him by officers of Operation Canova, a multi-million-pound criminal investigation led by John Boucher, a former Chief Constable of Bedfordshire, into the activities of the Army agent known as Steak Knife. A catalyst for Operation Canova was the Sandy Lynch case, because the omission of crucial information from prosecuting authorities in that case eventually exposed the existence of secrets that had been concealed. Barra McGrory, a former Director of Public Prosecutions in Northern Ireland, was among those integral to the setting up of Operation Canova.
The decision to prosecute any criminal charge is one for the Director of Public Prosecutions and the Director of Public Prosecutions alone.
In the wake of the Sandy Lynch episode, a decision to prosecute those arrested was taken in the absence of all relevant material.
Information and material which was integral to the events, which should have been before the then Director of Public Prosecutions, who was Sir Alistair Fraser QC, my predecessor, was withheld from the Director, and which, had it been made available to him, would most likely have led the then Director to the conclusion that he shouldn't prosecute. So while my initial concern was in respect of the deception of the Director of Public Prosecutions, it escalated into a concern in respect of the potential covering up of up to 20 plus murders. And that's what ultimately led to Canova.
The convictions of 8 people, including Gerard Hodgins, had already been quashed. But the contents of the file which was withheld all those years ago has never been made public.
What was kept secret has remained secret. To this day, we still don't know what's contained within that. It may well contain reference to Fred Scappaticci and or others. We don't know.
What's also unknown is if other criminal cases were prosecuted where crucial information was withheld.
I suppose it's a fair question that if it had happened once, could it happen again? And the answer has to be yes. But that is why I was so exercised to have this matter fully investigated.
But for some people, the possibility that it could have happened in other cases is an appalling vista.
It is an appalling vista. It is an appalling vista.
In the wake of the Sandy Lynch episode, Freddie Scappaticci's position in the IRA was beginning to wane. Those at the top of the IRA know exactly when they cast their spy catcher into the cold. But Scappaticci did not meet the same end brutally exacted on others.
The IRA leadership's reason for not executing Freddie Scappaticci back in 1990, in my view, was a result of a need to save their own skin. The IRA were keenly aware that every interaction they had with Freddie Scappaticci, every order they give to kill, every order they give to kidnap, every order they give to interrogate or torture, Freddie Scappaticci had passed that on to the British. And also that Freddie Scappaticci may have recorded this and that they were in deep, serious trouble.
In 2003, Freddie Scappaticci publicly denied he was Steak Knife after being named as the agent by several newspapers.
I'm not guilty of any of these allegations. I have not left Northern Ireland since I was challenged by reporters on Saturday night. Nobody had the decency to ask me if any of these allegations were true.
His death means he will never speak his truth.
I don't think Freddie took any secrets to his grave. I think they're very well known. They're not known by me, but they're known by his handlers, and they're known by the leadership of the IRA. In my view, the people who have most to fear from Operation Canova are probably those people who served in the Army Council and ordered the killings.
As some people see it, this episode is one of those times where parts of the state and the IRA are on the same side in terms of having a vested interest in keeping it a secret for a long, long time.
Well, what I would say about that is that the truth of this story isn't comfortable for anybody. It isn't comfortable for anybody. So, when it is told, whenever that is, there will be a lot of uncomfortable people.
An Operation Canova report due to be published later this year may shine a light on details long kept in the dark about the activities of Agent Steak Knife, including what was known about the interrogation of suspected informers before they occurred.
As I understand it, there is a potential assertion that every single case that's the subject of the Operation Canova investigation, in every single killing, that those deaths were preventable had there been some form of state intervention. Now that's a pretty stark assessment to make, and we're going to know that very, very soon, whether or not that stands up to scrutiny.
John Boucher declined to be interviewed for this programme. His report is currently in what's described as the security checking stage. The Ministry of Defence told Spotlight, as the investigation is ongoing, it would be inappropriate to comment further. Sean Maguire, known to many as McGear, now works as a senior Sinn Féin press officer. His solicitor told Spotlight that his client was interviewed under caution by the Operation Canova investigation team in November 2018. He denied any allegation that he was involved in the unlawful imprisonment and conspiracy to murder Sandy Lynch in 1990. A solicitor for senior Republican Sean Spike Merry told us that his client denies the allegations made by alleged British intelligence agent Freddie Scappaticci. These unfounded allegations are not new. They were first made 30 years ago, he added, and have been published on numerous occasions since then on various media/social media platforms. Freddie Scappaticci died in his 70s, a long life denied to his victims. But some secrets do not stay buried, and secrets from what many believe to be one of the murkiest episodes of the Troubles may yet come into the light.